The relentless wind howled through the tall prairie grass as Delilah Kincaid clutched the worn letter to her chest, her trembling fingers nearly tearing the paper that promised salvation from a life of destitution. The stagecoach rattled beneath her, each bump and jolt reminding her that she was now thousands of miles from the filthy Boston tenement where she'd buried both her parents just months before. Montana Territory, 1878. A place so vast and untamed that Delilah wondered if she'd made the most desperate mistake of her 22 years. But what choice did she have? After the influenza took her mother and the factory accident claimed her father, the landlord had made his intentions perfectly clear: pay the mounting debt or warm his bed. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like divine providence, a rancher seeking a bride in the Montana Territory, passage paid, no questions asked. "Last stop before Whitewater Creek," the driver called out, his voice barely audible over the thundering of hooves and creaking of wood. Delilah swallowed hard, smoothing down her faded blue dress, the only decent one she owned. Her entire life was packed in the small trunk beneath the coach. A Bible, her mother's silver hairbrush, 2 changes of clothes, and the wedding band that had belonged to her grandmother. Not much to show for a life, but it was all she had. The coach lurched to a stop in front of a dusty trading post. A handful of weathered buildings constituted what passed for a town in this wilderness. Delilah stepped down gingerly, her city boots entirely unsuitable for the muddy ground. "You must be the mail-order bride," said a gray-haired woman who appeared from the general store. "We weren't sure you'd actually come." Delilah lifted her chin. "I'm here to meet Mr. Gabriel Blackburn." The woman's face fell slightly. "Well, honey, you'd best come inside. There's something you should know." Delilah's heart sank. Was he dead? Had he changed his mind? She followed the woman into the store, where the scent of coffee and tobacco mingled with leather and dried goods. "My name's Martha. I run this place with my husband, Tom," the woman said, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "Gabriel's a good man, but he's not exactly what he might have described in those letters." "Is he cruel?" Delilah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Lord, no." "Nothing like that. Just circumstances change quick out here. His ranch burned down 3 months back. Lightning strike. He lost near everything." Delilah sat heavily on a wooden chair. "Then he doesn't want a bride anymore." "He doesn't know you're coming," Martha said gently. "Those letters take months sometimes. He sent for you before the fire. Been working like a man possessed ever since, rebuilding. Too proud to send word canceling his request, I suspect." The enormity of her situation crashed down on Delilah. She had less than $10 to her name, no home to return to, and apparently no groom waiting. "Where is he now?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Out at his property, 5 miles west. He's rebuilding the house himself." Delilah took a deep breath. "Then I should go to him. I've come this far." Martha looked at her with a mixture of pity and admiration. "Tom can take you out there tomorrow morning. Tonight you can stay with us." "Thank you, but I'd rather go today," Delilah insisted. "I need to know where I stand." An hour later, Delilah sat beside Tom in a wagon bouncing over rutted trails. The vastness of the land overwhelmed her endless sky stretching to meet rolling hills and distant mountains. So different from the crowded, smoke-filled streets of Boston. "There he is," Tom finally said, pointing to a distant figure. As they drew closer, Delilah saw a man working on the frame of what would someday be a house. The skeleton of walls reached toward the sky, and a man moved between them, hammering with focused determination. Tom halted the wagon. "Gabriel, got someone here to see you." The hammering stopped. The man turned, and Delilah got her first look at the man she had agreed to marry. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face bronzed by the sun. Dark hair curled beneath his hat, and a beard covered the lower half of his face. When he saw her, he froze, hammer still in hand. "Who's this?" he called, approaching the wagon slowly. Delilah Kincaid, she answered before Tom could speak. I believe you sent for me, as a bride. Gabriel Blackburn's eyes widened with shock. That was before. Before the fire. Yes, I've been told. Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Tom cleared his throat. I'll leave you two to talk. Gabriel, I'll be back this way tomorrow to check on things. Before Delilah could protest, Tom had turned the wagon and was heading back toward town. She stood alone, her small trunk at her feet, facing a man who clearly hadn't expected her. I'm sorry, Gabriel said finally, removing his hat. I should have written, told you not to come. Would it have reached me in time? Delilah asked. He shook his head. Probably not. Then there's no need to apologize for that. She gestured to the half-built structure. You're rebuilding. Trying to, he said, his voice rough. Not much to offer a wife now. Delilah looked around. The foundation was large, much larger than she would have expected for a single man. It looks like you're building quite a home. Gabriel ran a hand through his hair. Had plans before. And now? Now I'm just trying to have a roof before winter. Delilah took a deep breath. Mr. Blackburn, I have nowhere to go. The money I had went to reach you. I can cook, clean, sew, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I'll earn my keep while you decide what you want to do about our arrangement. Gabriel studied her, his green eyes intense. It won't be easy. Nothing in my life has been easy, Mr. Blackburn. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Gabriel, if you're staying, you should call me Gabriel. Gabriel, she repeated, feeling a small flutter in her chest despite the uncertainty of her situation. He gestured toward a small tent pitched a short distance from the construction. That's all I have to offer for shelter right now. It's more than I had yesterday, Delilah said, attempting a smile. As the sun began to set, Delilah found herself sitting beside a small fire, watching Gabriel cook a simple meal of beans and salt pork. The silence between them was uncomfortable, filled with unasked questions. Your letters didn't mention a fire, she finally said. Gabriel poked at the flames. No point troubling you with it, but you could have told me not to come. He looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. I thought about it, but by then, I figured the letter wouldn't reach you in time, and I didn't have the money to send a telegram. What happened? She asked softly. Gabriel sighed. Lightning storm hit the barn first. Wind carried it to the house, lost near everything except the livestock. They were out grazing. He handed her a plate. I'm sorry, it's not much. Delilah accepted the food gratefully. I'm not here for luxury, Gabriel. What are you here for? Delilah Kincaid? He asked, his voice low. My letters promised a proper home, stability. That's gone now. She met his gaze steadily. I'm here because I had no choice. My parents died. The factory where I worked closed. I was alone with debts I couldn't pay. So I was just an escape. Yes, she admitted honestly, but you were also hope. Your letters spoke of building something, a life, a future. She gestured toward the half-built house. It seems you haven't given up on that. Gabriel looked toward his unfinished home. I'm stubborn that way. Then we have that in common. Later that night, Gabriel insisted Delilah take the tent while he slept under the stars. Lying on his bedroll, she stared at the canvas above her, listening to the night sounds of this strange new land. Crickets chirped, an owl hooted in the distance, and somewhere a coyote called to the moon. So different from the city noises she'd known all her life. Morning came with a spectacular sunrise that painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Delilah emerged from the tent to find Gabriel already at work, hammering at the frame of the house. She built up the fire and put coffee on to boil, then inventoried what supplies they had. When Gabriel came for coffee, he looked surprised to find biscuits warming by the fire as well. You've been busy, he commented, accepting the tin mug she offered. I found flour and lard in your supplies, she explained. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. Gabriel took a bite and closed his eyes briefly. "It's good, real good." "Thank you," she said, feeling a small glow of pride. "Gabriel, I want to help with the house." He looked skeptical. "It's hard work." "I'm stronger than I look," she insisted, "and I learn quickly. If this is to be my home too, I want to help build it." The word home hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to address. Gabriel nodded slowly. "All right, I could use the help." For the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Delilah learned to hold boards steady while Gabriel nailed them, to mix the mortar for the stone chimney he was building, to sand rough edges until they were smooth. Her soft hands grew calloused, her pale skin tanned in the Montana sun. At night, exhausted from the day's labor, they would sit by the fire and talk. Gabriel told her about his journey west after the war, how he'd staked his claim 5 years ago and slowly built up his small ranch. Delilah shared stories of Boston, her parents, the dreams she'd had before poverty had crushed them. "Why such a big house?" she asked one evening, looking at the structure taking shape before them. "It seems large for one man." Gabriel poked at the fire, not meeting her eyes. "Wanted a family, children. Figured I'd build it big enough for all the hopes I had." The simple honesty of his words touched something deep inside Delilah. "It's a beautiful dream." "Foolish, maybe," he said gruffly, "but I couldn't seem to build it any smaller." On the 10th day, Tom returned with supplies from town, bringing news and mail. Among the items was a letter for Gabriel. Delilah watched his face darken as he read it. "Bad news?" she asked when Tom had gone. Gabriel folded the letter carefully. "Banks calling in loans earlier than expected, with the fire and rebuilding. I'm not sure I can meet the payment." "How much?" she asked. $200, due in 6 weeks. Delilah's heart sank. It might as well have been $2,000 for all they had. "What happens if you can't pay?" "I lose the land." His voice was flat. "Everything." That night, Delilah couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking of the determination she'd seen in Gabriel these past days, the way he worked from dawn until dusk to rebuild what he'd lost. She thought of the house, designed for a family he still hoped for. The next morning, she approached him with an idea. "The town needs a seamstress," she said without preamble. "Martha mentioned it yesterday. I'm skilled with a needle." Gabriel frowned. "You want to work in town? I could earn money, help with the bank payment." "It's not your debt to pay," he said stiffly. Delilah raised her chin. "If I'm to be your wife, isn't it? Or have you decided against that?" The question hung between them. They hadn't spoken directly about their arrangement since her arrival. Gabriel looked away toward the distant mountains. "I haven't been fair to you," he finally said. "You came expecting one thing and found another. I wouldn't hold you to promises made before." "That's not what I asked," Delilah said softly. Gabriel turned to her then, his eyes intense. "No decent man would ask a woman to bind herself to this." He gestured to their primitive camp, the half-built house. "Perhaps I'm not looking for decent," Delilah replied. "Perhaps I'm looking for real." Something shifted in Gabriel's expression. He took a step toward her, then stopped himself. "I need to think," he said roughly, and walked away toward the corrals where his horses grazed. Delilah let him go, understanding that pride was a complicated thing for a man who had lost so much. She turned her attention to the day's work, determined to keep building, with or without his blessing. That evening, Gabriel returned with a deer slung across his horse. He dressed the meat in silence, and Delilah prepared a stew that filled the air with savory aromas. As they ate, he finally spoke. "If you want to work as a seamstress in town, I won't stop you." Delilah nodded. "Thank you. But I'll court you proper," he added, his voice firm. "If we're to be married, it won't be just because of some letters in desperate circumstances. It'll be because we choose it." Warmth spread through Delilah's chest. "I'd like that." The next day, Tom took Delilah to town. Martha was delighted with the idea of a seamstress and offered Delilah a corner of the store to set up shop. Word spread quickly, and by the end of the day, Delilah had orders for 3 dresses, 2 shirts, and a wedding gown for the banker's daughter. For the next month, Delilah divided her time between town and the homestead. 3 days a week she sewed, earning money stitch by stitch. The rest of the time she worked alongside Gabriel, building their home. The walls rose steadily, then the roof. Windows were installed, a proper floor laid. Gabriel constructed furniture by lamplight after long days of building a table, chairs, a bed frame. They never spoke of sleeping arrangements, both aware that the tent would not serve forever, but neither willing to presume. Their courtship progressed in quiet ways, Gabriel bringing her wildflowers he found on the range, Delilah reading aloud from one of the few books she'd brought while he whittled by the fire. One evening, as they sat beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Gabriel reached for her hand. His palm was rough against hers, calloused from the same work that had hardened her once soft hands. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low. "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "I've been thinking about why you came, about prayers and hope." Delilah waited, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. "When I sent for a bride, I was building a life I thought I had figured out," Gabriel continued. "Then I lost everything, and I thought God had turned his back on me." He squeezed her hand. "But then you arrived, with nothing but faith that things would work out somehow. And every day since, I've watched you build alongside me, not just a house, but hope." "We've built it together," Delilah whispered. "I know this isn't what you expected when you answered my advertisement," Gabriel said, "but I find myself grateful every day that you stayed, that you saw something worth building here." "I saw you," Delilah said simply, "a man who wouldn't give up even when everything was lost." Gabriel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. "I'm falling in love with you, Delilah Kincaid, not because of convenience or circumstance, but because of who you are." Delilah leaned into his touch. "I think I started falling the moment I saw you building that house, not for the man you were, but for the man who still believed in a future worth building." When Gabriel kissed her, it felt like coming home. His lips were gentle against hers, a question more than a demand. Delilah answered by leaning closer, her hands finding the solid warmth of his shoulders. The bank payment came due the week the house was finished enough to move into. Between Delilah's earnings and Gabriel's sale of 2 horses, they met it with $12 to spare. They celebrated by spending those dollars on proper curtains for the windows and seeds for a kitchen garden. Their wedding took place on a crisp autumn day, with the aspen trees turned gold against the blue Montana sky. The ceremony was small, just the preacher, Martha, and Tom, and a few neighbors who had helped with the final stages of the house. Delilah wore a dress she had made herself, and Gabriel wore the one good shirt he owned. "I, Gabriel, take you, Delilah, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady as the mountains behind him, "to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." When Delilah repeated the vows, her voice did not tremble. This was not the marriage she had imagined when she boarded that stagecoach months ago. It was better built on shared labor, mutual respect, and a love that had grown naturally between them. That night, in their new home, Gabriel carried her across the threshold. The house still smelled of fresh-cut wood and paint. Though simple, it was sturdy and warm, with windows that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackburn," Gabriel said, setting her down gently in the main room. Delilah looked around at the home they had built together, the stone fireplace where a fire crackled welcomingly, the solid table where they would share meals, the stairs leading to the loft where their bedroom waited. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Not finished yet," Gabriel said. Still need to add the porch and the extra rooms. Delilah looked at him questioningly. Extra rooms? Gabriel's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. For the children, remember? I built it big enough for all my hopes. Our hopes, Delilah corrected, stepping into his embrace. Our hopes, he agreed, holding her close. 5 years passed. The house grew with their family a porch where Delilah would sit and sew while watching Gabriel work the fields, a nursery for their son James, born the second winter, and their daughter Elizabeth, who arrived the following year. The garden flourished under Delilah's care, providing vegetables that sustained them through the long winters. Gabriel's ranch prospered too. With careful management and hard work, they increased their herd and acreage. Delilah continued her seamstress work, but now she did it from home, customers coming to her as Whitewater Creek grew into a proper town. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Gabriel took Delilah to the hill overlooking their property. The autumn sun gilded the land, turning the fields and pastures to gold. Below them stood their home, no longer just a framework of hope, but a living, thriving testament to what they had built together. Do you ever regret it? Gabriel asked, his arm around her waist. Coming west to marry a stranger? Delilah looked up at him, at the face she knew as well as her own. Not for a moment, though I suppose you're not a stranger anymore. No, he agreed with a smile. Not a stranger at all. As they stood there, their children's laughter carried up from the house where Martha was watching them. The sound mingled with the wind in the grass and the distant lowing of cattle, the soundtrack of the life they had built from nothing but determination and faith. When I left Boston, all I had was a prayer, Delilah said softly. I prayed for safety, for shelter. I never dared pray for happiness or love. Gabriel pulled her closer. And now? Now I know that prayers sometimes get answered in ways we never expect. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I came looking for security, but I found so much more. We both did, Gabriel said. You know, when the fire took everything, I thought God was punishing me somehow. Now I wonder if he wasn't making room for something better. Delilah thought of the day she had first seen Gabriel, working alone to rebuild what he had lost. She thought of the long days of labor, the nights by the fire, the slow blooming of love between them, a love built on shared struggle and mutual respect. Our home is big enough, she said. Big enough for what? Gabriel asked. Delilah smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. Big enough for all our hopes, including the new one that will be joining us this spring. Gabriel's face transformed with wonder. Another child. Another blessing, Delilah corrected. Another answer to prayers we didn't even know we were sending. As the sun began to set, they walked hand in hand back to the house they had built not just of wood and stone, but of perseverance, faith, and love. Inside, the lamps were lit against the gathering darkness, casting a golden glow through the windows. It beckoned them home, this place they had created from nothing but hope and determination. I love you, Delilah Blackburn, Gabriel said as they reached the porch. And I love you, she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him as their children raced out to meet them. That night, as the household slept, Delilah stood at the window looking out at the land that had become her home. The moon silvered the fields and the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the yard. So different from the crowded tenements of Boston, yet now she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. She thought of the desperate young woman who had boarded that stagecoach with nothing but a letter and a prayer. How frightened she had been, how alone. If she could go back and whisper in that woman's ear, what would she say? Perhaps simply this: courage does not mean the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. And sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the deepest disappointments. Gabriel stirred in their bed. Delilah, everything all right? She turned from the window, her heart full. Everything is perfect. And as she returned to her husband's arms, Delilah knew it was true. Not perfect in the way of fairy tales, but perfect in its reality, a life built with their own hands, a love chosen each day, a family created from the ashes of what was lost. A home big enough for all their hopes, built on nothing more than faith and the determination to create something lasting in this wild, beautiful land.